I just would love it if you could just kind of share the idea of Black Lives Matter and why that's, just clarity on those two, because I think some people, particularly white people, either are ignorant to it or they feel accused, or maybe they just don't understand why we're saying Black Lives Matter and why we can't just say all lives matter.
Yeah. Black Lives Matter is a fight for equality. Like, you have to understand that first of all. Of course, all lives matter. No one's saying that they don't. Like, this is the Black Lives Matter isn't saying that other lives don't matter. But what you have to understand is that when a particular demographic of people are targeted because of their skin color and often killed, then you have to. There's not equality. So you can't say, oh, all lives matter, but then a demographic of those people are absolutely all right, have no fear of being murdered or whatever else. But then this particular group is being murdered and killed and persecuted, targeted or whatever else. How can you not focus on this particular group? One of the analogies I think someone used, it's like having it's like a house being on fire, one house on the street, and then the fire brigade come in and people saying, well, what about that house down there? You need to go to that house. What about this house? Why don't you come to my house? But those houses are on fire. It's only the one house that's on fire. And it's like, with that kind of service, you attend to the house that's on fire. Now, for a lot of Black people, their house is on fire, metaphorically, in the sense of, well, we're the ones that are being targeted. If this was happening equally across the board, where you were witnessing on TV live in action as it happens, white people being brutally murdered in America, in the UK, or whatever else, then then we can have that conversation and we can champion that. But for as long as we've known, and in history, going back to slavery, after that, when, as I say, Black people were treated as property, that isn't equality.
No. When
Black people weren't allowed to vote, when Black people couldn't even go into the same shop, when they couldn't even sit on the bus, Rosa Parks, you think about that, when you had to go and sit in a certain place. There were places were labeled for coloureds or for Blacks, and you couldn't sit there. And we're a bit further than that, but then there's the undercover racism stuff. And if you're targeted because you're Black, then that's an issue with that particular demographic of people, in a sense of there's people going after that particular demographic of people. So when we say Black Lives Matter, we're not saying that all lives don't matter. We're not saying anything about that. We agree with that because we believe that all human lives matter. But when the focus, the pain, the experiences are happening to that demographic of people, Black people, then that's what the area of focus needs to be. Yeah. Does that make sense? And I think, going back to Billy, I think if people want a deeper understanding, as in it's I guess hard to explain it like this, but a written out explanation of it, Billie Eilish put it really well. So if you can, I think it's on Instagram, you can check her stuff on Instagram. The post that he was outraged, and then obviously on the other, then you have white privilege, but that's comes into systematic racism and stuff like that. And so there's equality across the board. Well, it has to be Black Lives Matter. I don't need to say white lives matter, because white lives already matter because the system is favored towards white people in so many senses, and there's so many examples of that, which we haven't got time to get into. But until Black Lives Matter just as much as every other life, then of course that's why we say that's why there's that movement. 100%. It's a fight for equality.
100%. And just that analogy is so good. And for me, we're going to get on to just maybe any practical steps you might have, but I just wanted to share this one thing, particularly on white privilege. And I like to talk about white privilege as a white person, because I feel like if there is one thing I can talk about that, because I even just started to become aware of it just around my other white friends, that actually, I had a kind of friendship group of 5 or 6 people when I was younger, and I was the only one in my friendship group to have parents that were still together, just as an example, right? So from a young age, I was already aware of my privilege just amongst people who were really similar to me. But then I watched this video, you might have seen it on Facebook, and it's this gym teacher, and he has $100, and he says, and he lines all his students up, and he says, we're going to do a race, and the first person to grab this $100 is going to win. But before we do, if you have grown up in a household with two parents, step forward. If you've ever had to think about where your next meal is going to come from, stay stood still. If you've never had to think about that, step forward. If you've got a relative in jail, stay where you are. If you don't have a relative in jail, step forward. And you just start to see the black people are at the back, haven't stepped once, and these white kids are moving slowly further forward, and a black kid takes a step every so often, but for the most part, and by the end he asks all these different questions. By the end, it's all these white people who basically right in front of him could just grab the $100, and all these black people further behind. And he was funny. He said if this was an equal race, some of these black dudes would smoke you guys, like they would get the $100 quicker than you guys. But it was such an example of white privilege, and it's hard. And what was powerful is he said, everybody turn around and look behind you. And for me, that's what I want to do right now, because if you're in your own life as a white person, just focusing on your life, you're never going to see your privilege because you're not actually looking behind you. And for me, if black people are speaking up and saying, we're being killed, we're being marginalized, we have to turn around and look at that. Yeah. And when we turn around and look at that, we then see the privilege. We see the gap. We see, I didn't have to grow up being profiled every day. I didn't ever have to, look over my shoulder. I didn't ever have to get worried when a police officer came to speak to me, all that kind of stuff. So I just wonder if there's any sort of practical things you feel like we could do. I'm gonna say some at the end of this sermon, but just if you feel like particularly there's maybe something.
Yeah, sorry it's dark. There's no point putting the light on now. It just got dark, and I'm in a corner, little section of a man cave. But it's and before I say that, I just wanted to quickly say, I know you're probably running out of time, but even with stuff like your hair as a child in school, like I experienced that, and a lot of my black friends, and I've seen it so many times, and parents fighting for justice within that, children black children and mixed race children being expelled for having their natural hair. Like, I understand certain rules. Having an afro, if they had dreads even, and it's just like, well, that's a cultural thing. That's that's their natural hair. Like, what do you want them to do? But it's just like, it's even saying that they can't have it a certain length and whatnot. It's like, black hair is different to white hair. Like, you have to understand that as well. So there's so many different things. There's so many layers to it, and this is what people have to understand. It's not just a straightforward solution. Like, there are so many layers, but practical solutions, I guess, or moving forward. I think first, in order to move forward, you've got to acknowledge it. I think you can. I think before you even, how can you pray about it when you don't acknowledge it? Like, you can't pray about it if you don't acknowledge it. And I think there's got to be an acknowledgement that is happening, and that ask yourself why you've never been in some of the positions that black people have been in and probably never will be. Ask yourself that first. Ask yourself, do I fear to go out? That I'll be, because I guess for a lot of people, they just think, well, if I don't commit crimes, then I won't get troubled by the police. But for a lot of black people, it's like, they'll accuse me of a crime, or they'll assume that I've done a crime, and that's what happens in America and here, and I'll be guilty before I'm even proven innocent. We've seen it even, you've seen what happened with, in Manchester with the guy that got dealt with by the police at the petrol station with his kid in front of him. And then someone shared a contrast of the white person was pushing the police officer, he didn't do nothing. Police officer didn't arrest him, I don't even think, or anything. I'm like, wow, that is such a contrast. But practical thing first is acknowledging. I think you've got to understand, educating yourself. People like me, like I say, I will, if you genuinely reach out and you want to know more, I'll share with you what I know. I'm no expert. I know from my personal experience and what I've seen and what my friends have seen and what's going on, because that's been my fight since I was a kid. But it's taking that time to acknowledge it, to find out more because I understand a lot of people don't understand. And I think that's okay if you don't understand. But if you're not in a place where you don't want to understand, then I think that's a problem. So I think you've got to come to a place of developing the desire to learn. If you don't have the desire, asking God, what's wrong with you? In a sense, because I believe God has that desire. I believe that it breaks God's heart. So that's one way, first of all. And then obviously it's prayer. As Christians, we have to go into prayer. There is a spiritual battle. I believe that first and foremost. I believe the spiritual influences the physical and all that stuff. Yeah. But we have to be praying intentionally, praying for our Black brothers and sisters that are dealing with that stuff here locally in our own communities and extended communities, for the United Kingdom, and obviously especially for America. But praying intentionally for those people, praying that actually that you can be of some use as well, that you can contribute to the solution rather than be part of the problem. I guess it's praying for that kind of stuff as well, but fighting in the spirit, because it's a battle in the spirit, spiritual warfare. It's just like, to rebuke the enemy and tell him that you're not going to stand for it, that you stand against it, asking God to empower you and to fight that fight, and getting around, I guess, people that understand what's going on and have experienced it. They're two things. And I think also, maybe, sharing something maybe in this, because I think that so many Black people that I know have been really, really upset, actually. Really, really upset at the situation, but also at the lack of leadership and initiative on this subject. Because I guess what silence shows is that you're not standing with us, that it doesn't bother you, that it doesn't affect you. And especially when you post about everything else and you're talking about, pray for this and pray for that, and this scripture's great and this is really good, and today I was walking with my dog and we had a good day. Like, that's all well and good. But people are dying. Do you know what I mean? Because I always think, well, if it was a terrorist attack, how many people would be talking about it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If it was, in a way, to us, it is a form of terrorism. In a way, to us, that's what it is. And I've dealt with the police in New York. I know how some of them are. But so that's another way, is maybe just posting something. And if you feel like I don't know how to post or what to post, one of my friends from church who's white, he phoned me last night. He's like, Marv, I don't know what's going on. I don't really know what to post. And I don't want to offend the Black community and this and that. And it was really simple. I broke it down for him, and I've not told him he has to post, but because we've had that conversation, I know where his heart is, and he was explaining how much it bothers him. And sometimes it is as simple as that. For the Black people that that you're friends with and you have that are in your church and whatever else, like, reach out to them, just ask them if they're all right. And it's just showing, I think if you're honest, you can't really go wrong. Like, in a sense of, like, if you're honestly just saying that, look, I care about you and I care that this bothers you, but I don't fully understand it. It's not really my experience, but I want to know more. Anyone that gets mad at that is a fool, if I'm honest. Like, they're a fool. So it's just not being scared to reach out to your Black friends and family, and also showing them, because I've appreciated every message that I've received that's been positive in this, because there has been some negative ones as well, but that's been positive in the sense of I'm standing with you and just taking that time to acknowledge, like, look, like I say, I don't know what's going on, but I'm gutted about this. That's a step that you've got to take. But sharing a picture of whether it's George Floyd, sharing a picture of Black Lives Matter, if you understand the concept, or what, just saying, I'm against racism. Because what you do, even just, sometimes you don't even have to say anything, even just sharing a picture like that, it's probably best that it's not got loads of writing on, in case it's something that could put you in a position where you're going to be conflicted or people are going to come at you. But just, if you share a picture of George Floyd, or you share a picture of Black Lives Matter, do you know where the backlash comes from? For me, I'll tell you where the backlash comes from. White Christians. And that's sad. White Christians, white Christian men mainly, and some in leadership. I've had pastors message me and saying that this isn't the fight, there's no colour in heaven and all this stuff. That's not even scriptural. But I put the other day, that, look, this isn't a black versus white thing. This is everybody versus racism.
Wow, what a conversation. I'm just so inspired by Marvin. I have so much respect for him. He shared one thing with me after we stopped the recording, that he said a lot of his Black friends find it so difficult to come to church, find it so difficult to come to Christ because of the lack of speaking out that white Christians are doing. And actually, a lot of white Christians seem to be on the side of the racists. And, for me, that's just not on. We have to counteract that. So I hope you've enjoyed the first episode of the Preach What You Practice podcast. Please subscribe. Please share it with your friends. Please get involved. And we'll see you again soon for another episode.